Luke McConnell hadn't planned on stopping in that small town. He was just driving through, chasing the silence that never stayed long enough. After retiring from the Army Rangers, life had slowed down, but peace never followed. The road became his home, the engine his only company. He wasn't looking for trouble, and he sure wasn't looking for anyone. But that night, rain hit his windshield like it was trying to say something, and his stomach reminded him that he hadn't eaten since noon. He pulled into a little diner with flickering neon lights, half thinking he'd just grab a sandwich and get back on the highway. But when he stepped inside, the smell of fresh coffee and old wood hit him, and something else did too, an odd feeling he hadn't felt in years. She was sitting in booth 9, alone. Brown leather jacket, hair pulled back loosely, eyes red, like she'd cried recently but was trying to pretend she hadn't. She was staring into a cup of coffee like it might answer her pain if she waited long enough. The waitress caught him staring and whispered, "She's been sitting there for over 2 hours. No food. Just that coffee." Luke didn't mean to walk over, but his feet moved before his mind did. Something in her reminded him of things he had buried. Maybe the loss of a friend, maybe the feeling of being lost yourself. He stood beside the booth and nodded gently, his voice calm but firm, like the soldier he once was. "Is this seat taken?" She looked up, surprised at first, then wary. "Depends who's asking," she said, her voice soft but with a sharp edge, like someone who'd been hurt too many times to trust easily. Luke smiled a little. "Name's Luke. Just passing through. Thought you might like some company. If not, I'll go." There was a long pause. Her eyes searched his, testing, measuring. Then she looked at the empty seat across from her and shrugged. "Fine. But I don't talk much." He sat down slowly, careful not to push. "That's all right. I've had enough talking for a lifetime." They sat in silence for a while, just the hum of the diner and the rain outside filling the space between them. Eventually, the waitress came by and took their orders. Luke got black coffee and a bacon sandwich. She didn't order anything else. Her name was Claire. He found that out halfway through his sandwich when he asked gently, "What's a woman like you doing in a place like this?" And she gave a tired smile. "Hiding from the world. My name's Claire." There was something in her tone that told Luke not to ask more, so he didn't. Instead, he shared his own story in small pieces. Grew up in Texas, joined the military at 19, spent most of his life overseas, lost a lot of friends, came home and didn't feel like it was home anymore. Claire nodded like she understood that feeling. "Sometimes I wake up and don't even know what day it is," she whispered. "Like life just kept going, and forgot I existed." Luke looked at her, really looked, and realized how much pain she was holding. It wasn't just sadness. It was something deeper, something heavy she carried everywhere. Her eyes were kind, but guarded. Her fingers always stayed close to her phone, like she was waiting for something, or maybe running from it. He noticed the faint tan line on her ring finger and how she rubbed it sometimes without realizing. Still, he didn't ask. He knew that kind of hurt. You had to wait until the person was ready. They talked for almost 3 hours. It started with little things, books, music, food. Then little cracks began to show. Claire mentioned she had been a nurse once. "In another life," she said. Luke asked if she missed it. "I miss who I was back then," she answered. That hit him harder than he expected. He knew that feeling all too well. He looked down at his hands, still calloused from years of combat, and said, "I think we all leave pieces of ourselves behind. Some just take longer to find again." She nodded slowly, not saying anything, but her eyes got glassy for a moment. As the night grew darker, the rain softened. Luke offered to walk her to her car, but Claire shook her head. "I live close. Just needed to think." He didn't press. He paid for both coffees without her noticing, and before she left, She paused by the door and turned back. "Thanks, Luke, for not asking too many questions." He gave a small grin. "Thanks for not making me talk about politics." She chuckled quietly, and for a moment, something in her eyes lit up. Then she was gone into the night. Luke stood outside the diner for a while, watching the direction she walked in, wondering if he'd ever see her again. But deep down, he knew he would. He didn't know how or when, but he felt it. Something had started that night. Something quiet but real. And even though they were both broken in different ways, something about her felt like home. Not the kind you return to, but the kind you find when you stop running. He got into his truck, turned the key, and just sat there. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like driving away. So he didn't. Instead, he checked into a motel down the road. He told himself it was just for the night. But part of him already knew. It wasn't. Luke and Claire's bond grew quietly but surely over the next few days. Luke had settled into the small town, and every evening, he found his way back to the diner or the nearby bar called Rusty's. It wasn't a fancy place, just a handful of regulars, a jukebox playing old rock songs, and a worn wooden floor that had seen better days. One night, Claire showed up at Rusty's with a hesitant smile, and Luke's heart skipped a beat. They weren't dancers by any stretch, but laughter spilled out of them as they tried to match each other's clumsy steps. The moment was light, almost like a small escape from the heaviness they both carried. But the peace didn't last long. 3 men stumbled in, their eyes immediately locking onto Claire with a cold recognition that froze her smile. Luke noticed it first, how she suddenly stopped moving, how her laughter died in her throat. One of the men swaggered up to her, his voice thick with alcohol and menace. Well, look who decided to show her face around here," he sneered, stepping too close, invading her space. Luke didn't wait to see what Claire would do next. His training took over. He moved between her and the man, his voice low and sharp. "Back off." The man laughed mockingly, as if daring Luke to make a mistake. The room seemed to hold its breath. Then the punch came. A quick, angry swing aimed at Luke's face. He ducked just in time, grabbed the man's shirt, and slammed him into a table. Glass shattered. Chairs scraped the floor as the other 2 men lunged forward. What followed was a blur of fists and shouts. Luke wasn't looking for a fight, but he wasn't backing down either. When it was over, the 3 men lay groaning on the floor, blood mixing with spilled drinks. Luke's knuckles were raw, his heart pounding, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of protecting someone who didn't even ask for it. Claire was still frozen, staring at the scene like she couldn't believe what had just happened. "Are you okay?" Luke asked, voice softer now. Her hands trembled as she nodded, whispering, "They know where I am now." That simple sentence carried a weight that settled deep into Luke's chest. It was more than a warning. It was a threat. Something from her past had followed her here, and it was dangerous. That night, they didn't sleep. Claire finally opened, up about the life she was running from, and Luke listened without interrupting. Her story was painful but honest. She had been married once, to a man named Michael. He wasn't just any man. He was a detective in Chicago, well respected on the surface, but underneath he was controlling and violent. Claire's nursing job often ended with bruises she tried to hide and silent tears she refused to shed. After the 3rd time she woke up in the emergency room, she made the hardest decision of her life. She left, changed her name, moved from city to city, trying to stay 1 step ahead. But the past has a way of catching up. The man Luke had knocked out at the bar was Michael's cousin, a reminder that the web of danger was wider than she'd hoped. "They'll come for me now," Claire said quietly, fear flickering in her eyes. Luke's mind raced. He wasn't a cop, but he wasn't helpless either. He had survived wars, fought battles most people couldn't imagine. And now, Here he was, face to face with a fight that mattered just as much. "If they come, they'll have to go through me," Luke said, standing tall, the protective instinct that had defined his life flaring up stronger than ever. Claire looked at him like he was a lifeline, someone she hadn't dared to believe would stand beside her. But the night was far from over. Plans had to be made, escape routes drawn. They couldn't stay where they were. Trust was fragile but necessary. Luke promised to be her shield, and Claire found, for the first time in a long while, a flicker of hope. The past still haunted her, but maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to face it alone. The next few days were filled with tense preparation and cautious hope. Luke and Claire moved from place to place, avoiding familiar streets and eyes that might be watching. Luke's military training became their greatest asset. He showed Claire how to stay alert, how to read danger before it arrived. Even in moments of fear, there was a quiet strength growing between them, something neither had expected but both needed. One evening, they found themselves in an old warehouse on the edge of town. It was empty except for a few crates and the sound of wind whistling through broken windows. Luke wanted Claire to see that she was not alone anymore, that she had someone to trust. He sat beside her, and for a moment, the walls they'd both built around their hearts began to crumble. "You're stronger than you think," Luke said softly, watching her face. Claire looked at him, eyes shining not with tears, but with a fragile kind of hope. "I never believed I could be," she whispered. "Not until now." Their hands brushed, then held, and in that quiet moment, the world outside seemed to fade. But peace was still fragile. Luke knew Michael's men wouldn't give up so easily. They were professionals, and desperation made them dangerous. One night, as Claire slept for the first time without fear in days, Luke heard footsteps outside. His heart pounded as he crept to the window. 3 shadows moved in the darkness, armed, quiet, and searching. Luke quickly woke Claire, whispering that they had to move fast. Claire's face was pale but steady. "Let's go," she said, her voice stronger than Luke expected. They slipped out through a back door, running toward the woods behind the warehouse. The cold air bit at their skin, but they didn't stop until the shadows were far behind. It was a narrow escape, but it showed Luke how much Claire wanted to survive, to fight back. After that night, they knew hiding was no longer enough. They had to face the threat head-on. Luke contacted an old friend from the Rangers, someone who owed him a favor. Within hours, help arrived in the form of a small, trusted team ready to protect Claire and bring justice to those who had haunted her. The confrontation was inevitable. When Michael himself appeared at the edge of town, Luke was ready. The final showdown was not a grand battle, but a tense and raw moment in a quiet park. Michael, surprised to see Luke, tried to intimidate him, but Luke stood firm. Claire stepped forward, no longer hiding. "This ends now," she said, her voice steady and clear. Michael laughed bitterly, but Luke saw the fear behind his eyes. The law caught up with Michael that night, thanks to Luke's team and Claire's courage to face her past. Justice was served not with guns blazing, but with truth and resolve. In the days that followed, Luke and Claire began to rebuild their lives. It wasn't easy. Trust had to be earned, fears had to be faced. But they found strength in each other. One evening, sitting on a porch watching the sunset paint the sky, Claire took Luke's hand and said, "You saved me more than once. Not just from them, but from myself." Luke smiled, feeling a warmth he hadn't known in years. Maybe we saved each other. Their story wasn't about perfect endings or fairy tales. It was about 2 broken people learning to trust again, finding love not in grand gestures but in quiet moments and shared strength. The lesson was clear. No matter how dark the past, the future can be bright if you're brave enough to face it, and never afraid to ask for help. Luke and Claire knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but for the first time in a long time, they looked forward to walking it together.